Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. I'm the vicious older sister of the female lead. The kind of vicious older sister who, when the female lead saves Dorian Moo from near death, can still rush forward to claim the credit. Honestly, this can't be blamed on me. If you want to blame someone, blame Dorian's brain for not being particularly sharp. At that time I was shopping at a jewelry store. When Dorian saw me holding a jade pendant, his eyes immediately lit up. He hurriedly rushed over and asked me, "Is this elder sister's jade pendant?" I thought for a moment. This jade pendant was something I had just won from Orchid Lou, but once it came into my hands, it was mine. So I hung the jade pendant on my waist, glanced at him coldly, and said, "It's mine, so what? If it's not mine, so what? Do you want to snatch it from my hands?" Dorian's face flushed red from my words, flustered and waving his hands repeatedly, saying I didn't mean that. I scoffed coldly, not bothering with this fool anymore, and turned to leave. Dorian wasn't angry either. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at me, following me step by step, calling out elder sister with extreme affection. Elder sister, I wonder how elder sister should be addressed and where does she live? This one is quite a chatterbox, annoying me to death. I tilted my head and glared at him. His gaze fell on the jade pendant, and suddenly an interesting idea came to mind. So I told him I was the 6th young miss of Minister Lou's household, ranked 6th. Dorian's eyes lit up again, clinging to me and saying all sorts of things, all words of praise for my beauty and kindness. I found that although this kid was a bit noisy, his mouth was quite sweet. The next day, I heard that the young Marquis of the Jungwo Duke's mansion came to propose marriage. The one being proposed to was none other than the 6th young miss of Minister Lou's household. I went over to see, and the display was truly grand. The Grand Princess personally acted as matchmaker. Dorian stood beside the Grand Princess. Noticing someone watching from outside the window, he looked up and saw me. His eyes blazed brightly. "Oh, so he's the young Marquis of the Jungwo Duke's mansion. He really is a fool." I used my fan to cover half my face and then left. Unfortunately, I hadn't gone 2 steps before I ran into Orchid Lou, who had also come to gather information. She stared fixedly at the jade pendant on me, her face full of sorrow. Anyway, I was already bored with this trivial toy, so I generously gave it to her to play with. She was so happy she cried. After the jade pendant left, I bumped into Dorian. The two of us locked eyes. Orchid froze, then blushed and curtsied to Dorian, her voice as soft as a mosquito's hum. "Marquise, may you be blessed." But this fool Dorian paid her no attention at all. He quickly brushed past Orchid and rushed to my side. "Elder sister. What a coincidence to meet you again." His eyes sparkled brightly, deliberately tilting his head to look at me, the corners of his mouth unable to hide his smile. As Dorian spoke, he took out from his chest a jade hairpin in the shape of a white rabbit and held it before me, a bit nervously. "Elder sister. This is a hairpin I made myself. Does elder sister like it? Still a fool who likes to show off." I raised my fan across my nose, glanced at the hairpin in his hand, and lightly nodded my head, considering it agreement. Dorian immediately beamed with joy. His hand holding the hairpin trembled slightly. After a long while, he said with a red face, "Elder sister, let me put it on for you." I hadn't yet spoken when Orchid, standing behind Dorian, had already frozen in place. She seemed unable to believe it, her face deathly pale, staring fixedly at Dorian's back. But Dorian only had eyes for me, completely ignoring her. Looking at the state of these two, I raised my fan to gently touch the bridge of my nose, smiling meaningfully. Jade, the maid behind me, immediately understood and stepped forward to receive the hairpin. Although Dorian felt a bit regretful, he was also sensible and remained calmly in place, not demanding anything more. The sun outside was blazing. I was too lazy to chat under this scorching sun, so I turned and left. Before leaving, I suddenly remembered something, turned my head to look at Orchid beside him, finally looked at Dorian, smiled without quite smiling, and said, "I wish the young Marquis gets his heart's desire." Dorian's eyes lit up, nodding repeatedly, his gaze toward me growing even more fervent. I didn't turn back again. Naturally, I also didn't see Orchid gathering all her courage to step forward, wanting to talk with Dorian. Dorian had already withdrawn the smile he wore when facing me. He looked down at her coldly, his expression haughty and arrogant. Under his cold gaze, Orchid's face grew paler and paler. In the end, she could only cover her face and run away. This matter was overheard by little Jade when she went to get crispy pastries for me. The little maid in Orchid's courtyard said that when Orchid returned, she cried so much her pillow was soaked through. I found this extremely entertaining. For some reason, I had a premonition that the wedding day of Dorian and little sister Orchid would definitely have an interesting show to watch. To thank little sister Orchid for bringing this entertainment, I specially sent people to deliver dozens of boxes of jewelry to express my gratitude. But when Orchid saw the precious treasures and brocade filling the courtyard, her face turned ashen. Yet she didn't accept a single item. "Miss, those dozens of boxes of things have all been returned," little Jade, my close maid, reported to me indignantly. I covered my mouth with handkerchief and laughed softly. Fine, if she doesn't want them, I don't need to pretend we have deep sisterly affection either. I smiled lightly. I had already gone to see the deep red wedding dress that Orchid embroidered with her own hands. The craftsmanship was exquisite, truly not bad. She lived up to her name as the female lead. It's just that Orchid kept staring at me full of worry, afraid I would use the scissors in my hand to cut her laboriously made wedding dress to shreds. Do you think I'm that kind of person? At that time, I was eating melon seeds while asking little Jade, why guard against me like guarding against a thief? Little Jade's face showed no change. She poured tea for me and quietly answered one sentence, because you are. I coughed to cover my embarrassment, stuffing the melon seed shells in my hand into Jade's hands. She couldn't catch them in time, and the melon seed shells in her hand spilled all over the floor, scattering everywhere, turning into brilliant fireworks filling the sky. The Grand Princess's grandson, that young marquis of renowned reputation, marrying a wife, the scene was truly extravagant to the extreme. 8 people carried a large sedan chair, bringing 108 loads of dowry, parading through the capital in a full circle. Eastern coins and red paper covered the ground, making the watching crowd cheer endlessly. Everyone was happy and joyful. I sat in the elegant room of the Purple Tower, resting my chin, watching this grand wedding procession, muttering 2 words. He's doing this, I'm afraid for the next 5 years it will be hard for anyone to surpass. The auspicious time had arrived, the bride descended from the sedan. The sound of joyful music rang out from Jungwo Duke's mansion. Seeing this situation, I thought I should go and join in the celebration. I leisurely pushed through the crowd to one side, standing next to my father in the front row. Initially, Dorian was still smiling brilliantly, the corners of his mouth curving up endlessly. But just as he turned his head and saw me, the smile on his face suddenly froze. "Congratulations, congratulations." I smiled and cupped my hands in greeting to him. "Young Marquis, you've finally gotten your wish." He turned his gaze back, his eyes pausing on the female lead's waist, where there was an extremely familiar jade pendant. Dorian's eyes kept darting back and forth between me and Orchid. The people around finally realized something was wrong. Then Dorian suddenly lifted up little sister Orchid's red bridal veil. The joyful music also suddenly ceased. "Why is it you?" Dorian ground his teeth, forcibly suppressing his anger and asking. "Marquis, why is it not me?" Orchid also showed a bewildered expression, her eyes brimming with tears, truly making one's heart ache. But this crying of little sister Orchid truly moved people's hearts. How refined, truly too refined. I couldn't help but want to clap in praise, but seeing Dorian's unpleasant expression, I still reluctantly suppressed the urge to applaud. At this moment, I should still be a bit more modest. Only I didn't expect that even being this modest, the flames still spread to me. Dorian suddenly strode forward, his eyes red, grabbed my hand and pulled me into the middle. "The one I want to marry is clearly her. This is going too far. I'm just watching the show, I don't want to be an actor for people to watch." I struggled with all my might, desperately hitting his hand, but Dorian had no intention of letting go. On the contrary, he held even tighter, finally pulling me straight into his arms. "She is the true owner of the jade pendant. The one you want to marry is her, that's right. Let me go quickly." I couldn't help but scold. "Don't you understand human language?" When Orchid heard this, she became even more distressed, clutching the jade pendant and crying inconsolably, unable to speak. Dorian didn't believe it. He stared at Orchid's jade pendant for a moment, then furiously snatched it and threw it hard to the ground. Only hearing a resounding crash, the jade pendant shattered completely. I estimate that at the same time it shattered, there was also little sister Orchid's maiden heart. She staggered back 2 steps, her body swaying. But Dorian tightly gripped my wrist, furious, leaning close to my ear and saying, "Little liar, you clearly knew I was asking your name." "So what?" He asked about the jade pendant first, then asked me. Clearly he was asking who the owner of this jade pendant was. I said the name of the female lead, Orchid. "What's wrong with that?" I was completely unperturbed, looking straight into his eyes. "This jade pendant isn't mine, it belongs to little sister Orchid. The meaning is that the one he wants to marry is Orchid. I don't care about any jade pendant." Hearing this, Dorian's face darkened, his hand gripping even tighter. But seeing me slightly furrow my brow, he unconsciously loosened his grip. "The one I want to marry has always been you." Finishing his words, he quickly covered my head with the red bridal veil embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, intending to escort me to bow at the altar. I hit him while scolding. "You definitely have a problem. I am the legitimate daughter of the Liu family. The one you're marrying is little sister Orchid, the 6th daughter of my family." He ground his teeth and said by my ear, "That's right, I'm marrying the 6th daughter of Minister Liu." I said, "You are, then you are." I was pressed down by him, about to be dragged to bow at the altar. The red bridal veil with dragons and phoenixes had just been placed over my head when the other side rang out with the sound of a cane striking hard on the ground. "Nonsense." The Grand Princess's voice, though not loud, was cold and severe. "How can a marriage matter be treated as a joke?" I nodded repeatedly, really wanting to shout out that the Grand Princess was absolutely right. I originally only planned to come watch the excitement. Who knew Dorian would suddenly pull this move, without saying a word, just dragging me to bow at the altar? You must know his marriage tract clearly stated Orchid's name. Now when it comes time to bow at the altar, he changes his mind, saying he won't marry Orchid anymore, but wants to marry me as his wife. What exactly does he want to do? I hoped the Grand Princess would give Dorian a good scolding, and make him give up this absurd idea. "Grandmother." Dorian gripped hand tightly and said loudly, "Grandson will only marry her as wife in this lifetime. After the ceremony is complete, grandson will explain everything clearly. At that time, even if grandmother wants to break grandson's legs, grandson won't have a single word of complaint." The guests on all sides immediately broke into commotion. Without looking, I knew that at this moment, everyone's expressions must be quite spectacular. My hand clenched the veil, wanting to lift it up. Dorian pressed his lips together, gripping my hand tightly and saying softly, "She is the bride, she cannot lift it." "Dorian." I raised my foot, aimed at the position, and stomped hard on the back of his foot. I must admit I used all my strength, but Dorian not only didn't let go, but took advantage of the situation to hold me in his arms. "Don't make a fuss. This marriage, whether you marry or not, you must marry." Dorian hugged my waist and said softly by my ear, "Your struggling is useless. Your father has no intention of defending you." Under the veil, I smiled coldly. With that wretched father, as long as he can climb the high branch of the Grand Princess, it doesn't matter which daughter he marries off. If it weren't for Orchid being favored by Dorian, and instead it was a legitimate daughter like me, I'm afraid in his eyes it wouldn't be anything significant either. The Grand Princess, though angry, couldn't do anything with this only grandson of hers. She could only strike the cane hard on the ground. "Very well. If so, you should complete the marriage with Miss Liu first, then later bring the woman in your heart into the mansion as a concubine." One sentence decided my status as a concubine. I don't want to. At the same time, 3 voices rang out simultaneously in the wedding hall. I quickly lifted the veil and looked at Dorian beside me, then looked at Orchid, who had just bitten her teeth and held back tears to speak up. The 3 of us looked at each other, our faces all showing surprise. I could roughly guess Dorian's thoughts. I just didn't understand why Orchid wouldn't want to. I know she has long secretly fallen in love with Dorian. After Dorian proposed to Orchid, she was so excited she couldn't sleep for several nights. Moreover, the Grand Princess's proposal wasn't disadvantageous to her at all. If Orchid agreed to marry now, she would be Dorian's legitimate wife, with proper status and standing. I truly couldn't think of what reason she had to refuse. I looked at little sister Orchid with confusion. The usually timid one deliberately. At this moment, Orchid didn't look at me or at Dorian. She knelt before the Grand Princess, performing a thoroughly respectful bow, pressing her body very low, her forehead touching the ground, her voice hoarse. I know myself and the young Marquis have fate but no fortune. I only beseech the Grand Princess to consider the Marquis's deep feelings and fulfill their union." I furrowed my brow, immediately understanding Orchid's thoughts. She saw Dorian's attitude toward me, knowing this marriage couldn't continue anyway, and had become a laughingstock for the world. Better to retreat in order to advance, preserve some reputation. I gritted my teeth and stepped forward, not wanting to let her have her way. Just at this moment, an aged voice came from the inner chamber. "Very well, since you have such resolve, then I shall fulfill your wish. I hereby annul your marriage with Dorian and grant you the status of freedom." With one word, everyone in the wedding hall was shocked and hastily knelt down, shouting "Long live." Orchid's tears immediately poured out, kowtowing resoundingly to give thanks. "This humble subject thanks His Majesty the Emperor." The Emperor slowly walked out from the inner chamber, his gaze resting on me and Dorian, smiling without quite smiling, saying, "Fate bestowed by heaven. Today I shall be the matchmaker and bestow marriage upon you too." I hadn't yet had time to speak when Dorian's eyes blazed brightly. He pulled me down with a thud to kneel on the ground, his voice even louder than Orchid's. "We thank His Majesty the Emperor for bestowing this marriage." As soon as the marriage was bestowed, the music started again. Everyone in the wedding hall suddenly broke into laughter, raising their cups in congratulations, as if the stagnant scene just now was only an illusion. Only the Grand Princess sitting on high had an ashen expression. Dorian looked up, his eyes sparkling as he gazed at me, once again placing the red veil over my head. I just stood there dumbfounded, my mind buzzing. Wait, shouldn't someone ask my opinion? I seem to not have said the words I'm willing just now, right? Taking advantage of Dorian's happiness, I planned to quietly retreat backward. But immediately I was held back by the crowd watching the excitement, who pushed me before the wedding procession, laughing and telling us to bow at the altar. I was blocked by the red veil from seeing, staggering as I was pushed into Dorian's arms. The veil blocked my vision, preventing me from seeing Orchid's deathly pale face, clenching her hands and standing in a corner of the crowd. Blood dripped from her small palm onto the wedding dress she had embroidered over half a month, as if she didn't care at all. She just stared fixedly at me, her eyes overflowing with hatred. The 10th day of the 4th month in the lunar calendar is not an auspicious day. The Imperial calendar records it as a day suitable for traveling and marriage. I find nothing about it suitable at all. I sat on the wedding bed, irritably tearing off the red veil on my head, rolling it into a ball and throwing it out. Dorian just happened to push open the door and enter, getting hit squarely by the veil I threw. He quickly caught it, and before he could see clearly what it was, his face already bloomed with a brilliant smile. This is the first time elder sister has taken the initiative to give me something. I'm very happy. The anger and scolding I had suppressed all night were extinguished by Dorian's one sentence. Looking at Dorian's shameless appearance, I even suspected that if I slapped him, he might even lick my palm. Elder sister. Dorian sat down beside me, his face flushed, his body still carrying a faint smell of alcohol. It's late at night, is elder sister sleepy? Because he sat close, Dorian's hand brushed against my palm as if by chance. Then he unconsciously rubbed it gently, then as if suddenly remembering something, quickly withdrew his hand, his ear tips reddening. Seeing I didn't stop him, Dorian stole glances at me, seemingly wanting to touch again. If you have something to say, just say it. I glanced sideways at him. If your paws keep wandering, I'll chop them off. One sentence, it made Dorian immediately retract his hand, sitting obediently beside me, appearing very well behaved. But his eyes, no matter how you looked, were improper. This little brat really knows how to pretend. I felt a bit of a headache, momentarily not knowing how to face him. Both fell silent. The room suddenly became quiet, with only the crackling sound of the lamp. Both of us in turmoil couldn't help but sigh. I clearly remember in the plot, the one marrying Dorian was the female lead Orchid. How did it become me? Exactly where did it go wrong? Could it be I remembered incorrectly? Impossible. I bit my finger. Before I could think it through, my finger was pulled down by Dorian. He quietly placed his own finger on my lips. I turned to look at him, encountering his innocent expression and the words, "Don't bite yourself. If you get hurt, bite me instead." I fell silent, pushing his hand away and lying down on the bed to sleep. Dorian's eyes lit up, about to move closer when he heard me say next, "You sleep on the floor." He still wanted to say something, but upon meeting my cold gaze, he could only awkwardly squat beside the bed. I ignored him. Things had come to this point. The Emperor personally bestowed the marriage, it couldn't be changed. Thinking more was useless. I covered myself with the blanket to sleep. Originally thought staying in a new place would make it hard to sleep. Unexpectedly, before my eyes had been closed long, I had already fallen sound asleep. In the middle of the night, behind me it was as if someone had stuffed a large heater, burning hot and making me very uncomfortable. In my dream, I struggled fiercely, but in the end I was still held tightly by that burning heater, unable to move. It wasn't until the next morning when I woke up that I was still dazed. I asked Dorian, "Did you put a heater in for me last night?" Dorian sat on the floor, shaking his head obediently and answering, "No, elder sister was dreaming." I looked at him suspiciously, thought for a moment, then let it go and didn't bring up the matter again. The Grand Princess didn't like me. She made this very clear. When Dorian wanted to lead me to serve tea to her, I was smilingly blocked outside by the Grand Princess's close nanny. The reason she gave was also quite ridiculous. "The Grand Princess is unwell in body. I'm afraid of contagion. Please wait in the corridor, young madam." At the same time, from within the Grand Princess's courtyard came waves of female laughter, each sound louder than the one before. Nanny Chen smiled faintly, glancing at me, seemingly wanting to see how angry I would be. Too bad I showed no sign of the displeasure she expected. On the contrary, I acted as if I didn't care. "The Grand Princess is indisposed today. Then let's do it another day. Don't disturb the Grand Princess's rest. In the Grand Princess's courtyard there are guests. She can receive guests, can see Dorian, but doesn't want to see me. This attitude is already very clear. I'm not a fool. I won't be stupid enough to press my hot face against someone's cold bottom. Coincidentally, I didn't sleep well yesterday. Today I woke up early. Right now I'm still sleepy. Just in time to go back and catch up on sleep." I turned to prepare to return. Nanny Chen was startled by my unexpected action. She instinctively glanced at Dorian's expression beside me. After meeting Dorian's dark gaze, her body suddenly stiffened. Only then did Nanny Chen remember that I was the woman Dorian defied the Grand Princess's orders to marry. She deliberately made things difficult for me here, preventing me from entering and humiliating me. It wasn't me she humiliated but Dorian. Nanny Chen broke out in cold sweat, struggling to say, "Young madam, please stay." I pretended not to hear, walking even faster. Nanny Chen behind me grew anxious, hurriedly blocking my way. "Young madam, it was this old slave who was confused. This old slave will go report immediately." At this point, she no longer mentioned anything about the Grand Princess being unwell, begging profusely, wanting to bring me inside. My face was calm as I looked down at her. Nanny Chen then forced out an ingratiating smile. "Nanny," I smiled coldly, turning the jade bracelet on my wrist. "You're also someone who has served beside the Grand Princess for many years. At your age, what words should be said and what actions should be taken, you know better than me. I also don't mind telling you. I was originally forced to marry into Dorian's family. If you want to use inner residence tactics to suppress me, with my temperament, if I don't make a huge fuss, I won't let it go. I'm no soft persimmon. If the Grand Princess wants to make things difficult for me, I don't mind making a big scene out of it. Anyway, I'm not afraid of anything. Reputation or filial piety, I don't care about either. Whoever dares to provoke me and make me uncomfortable, I'll give them a slap to make them wake up." Nanny Chen hung her head in shame, taking a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on her forehead, nearly kneeling down before me. By this point, she finally understood why, when she made things difficult for me, Dorian not only didn't defend me but calmly stood by watching. Obviously he had long known that with my capabilities, 10 Nanny Chens wouldn't be my match. Just at this moment, Orchid supported the Grand Princess walking out from the inner courtyard. The Grand Princess coldly mocked, "Your tongue truly is sharp. Did your parents teach you to speak to your elders this way?" "Grandmother." Dorian blocked in front of me, calmly saying, "She's not wrong." He also didn't explain much. One sentence, "She's not wrong," had already determined the outcome of this farce. After speaking, Dorian took my hand, sneaking glances at me, seemingly waiting for my praise. I raised my eyebrow, grasping his hand back, making the corners of his eyes light up with laughter. "I see you've been bewitched by this fox spirit." The Grand Princess, seeing our small gesture, became so angry her body trembled, nearly bringing the cane down on Dorian. She was hastily stopped by Orchid. "Grandmother, please calm your anger." Orchid worriedly stroked her chest, then looked up at me. "Elder sister, don't make trouble anymore. Quickly kneel down and kowtow to admit your fault to grandmother." One confusing statement made everyone's eyes turn toward me. I glared and pointed at myself. "You're telling me to kneel?" Orchid pressed her lips together and said, "If not for elder sister, why would grandmother quarrel with brother Dorian?" I blinked, about to open my mouth to scold, when Dorian had already shielded me, saying, "What are you? How dare you stay in the Marquis's mansion?" I said loudly, "Someone come? Throw her out for me." At Dorian's command, guards immediately came to forcibly escort Orchid away. Orchid retreated 2 steps, her face deathly pale, tears welling up, but she forced herself to hold them back. Her body swayed, but she stubbornly refused to submit. The image of a weak white lotus became even more distinct. I clicked my tongue softly. "Let's see who dares." The Grand Princess shouted loudly, glaring at me first, then looking at Dorian. "You owe Orchid much. I have already accepted her as my granddaughter. From now on, she is your sworn sister." Dorian furrowed his brow, wanting to say something, but the Grand Princess didn't give him a chance. "I have something I want to ask you. Come inside." The Grand Princess turned and entered the house. Dorian answered, then turned close to me, intimately adjusting my clothes while saying in a low voice, "Elder sister, here you can do whatever you want, just like before you married. You don't need to be too cautious, and you don't need to give face to anyone. I will always be your support." His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for Orchid standing nearby to hear clearly. The meaning was very clear, that is, no matter what happened, he would always stand on my side. I raised my eyebrow, glancing to the side, seeing Orchid's complexion growing even more ashen. How pitiful. Until Dorian also entered the room, Orchid's complexion still hadn't recovered. I took a cold breath, not wanting to talk with Orchid anymore. I prepared to find a warm place to rest. I had just walked 2 steps when from behind suddenly came Orchid's trembling voice. "Elder sister, you must be very pleased with yourself, aren't you?" I tilted my head, looking straight into Orchid's eyes burning with hatred. "Stealing my husband and still." I coldly cut off her words. "Not so, little sister. You originally could have become his bride. It was you who insisted on pretending to be magnanimous, who insisted on refusing and pushing him away. Can you also blame this on me? To be honest, at that time, as long as she nodded her head, she would be the wife and I would be the concubine. So what? This matter hasn't even passed a full day, yet in Orchid's mouth it has already changed nature. You." Orchid's body stiffened, took a deep breath, then suddenly had an epiphany and changed the subject, her voice cold. "I am his life-saving benefactor. You stole my credit. You can't deny this point, can you?" I shrugged. I already told him. He didn't believe it. What an absurdity. The light in Orchid's eyes was like poison. She stared fixedly at me as if wanting to tear me to pieces. "No matter what you say behind my back to slander me, no matter how you smear me in front of the Marquis, I'm telling you, what's mine will ultimately still be mine." I stroked my chin, extremely agreeing. "That's right. You'd better hurry up, or in 2 more days when I have a child, you won't be able to take it back." She angrily stepped 2 steps toward me, furiously shouting. "Since childhood, I've always yielded to you. As long as you said one word that you wanted something, I would immediately offer my own things to you with both hands. You stole away everything I treasured. I never resented you. I always thought that as long as I yielded, as long as I avoided your sharp edges, then one day you would tire of this game of plundering from me. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong. A venomous woman like you fundamentally won't know repentance. On the contrary, you've gotten bolder and bolder, stealing my marriage in front of so many people, stealing my husband." Speaking to this point, Orchid's tears couldn't be held back anymore, streaming down. Her voice trembled, but she still said, "I won't endure anymore. Between you and me, we cannot coexist under the same sky." Finishing her words, Orchid used her hand to wipe away her tears, as if wanting to wipe away all the weakness from her body. Nanny Chen, standing nearby, had long been looking at Orchid with a pained expression, while I smiled without quite smiling, waiting for her to finish performing before opening my mouth. "You say I'm heinously evil, but no matter how vicious I am, I've never harmed your mother to death, have I?" Orchid's complexion stiffened. "When I transmigrated into this body, I was already 10 years old. That year, my mother was gravely ill. Orchid's mother took this opportunity to escape her status as an outer chamber woman who couldn't see the light of day, and was elevated to become a concubine of that scumbag father. At that time Orchid was timidly led before me, softly calling me elder sister. The original Celeste Lou was showing disgust, raising her hand to slap her, when I took over this body. Right at that moment, Orchid was trembling, not daring to move. I casually brushed a dry leaf from her hair. Because she was too frightened, Orchid fell to the ground. Her wrist was cut by a stone and blood, immediately crying inconsolably. Perhaps the vicious supporting female character and the resilient female lead truly were incompatible. That night, I was punished by that scumbag father under the pretext of bullying little sister, made to kneel in the ancestral hall. I naturally refused, overturning the altar full of memorial tablets in the ancestral hall. So I was stripped and pressed onto a bench to be beaten. 1 stroke, 2 strokes, 5 strokes, 10 strokes. I was beaten until barely alive. Orchid was held in the scumbag father's arms, watching me get beaten. If it weren't for my mother forcing her weak body to pick up a sword and kill the servant carrying out the punishment, I'm afraid that day would have truly died. I remember that night was very chaotic. The sounds of screaming, the sounds of shouting mixed with the smell of blood made me dizzy. The next day when I woke up, I merged with the original Celeste's memories and at the same time also lost my mother. Orchid came again to visit me. I raised my hand without any mercy and slapped her. I came with good intentions to comfort you, yet you hit me. Orchid cried pitifully. You truly are a dog-biting Lu Dongbin, not knowing good from bad, she cried while running outside, just running into the scumbag father. He angrily rushed over, about to strangle me. I smiled coldly. You go ahead, best to strangle me to death immediately. I've already had someone send a letter. Waiting for people from the Prime Minister's office to come see how you speak to your uncle like this. His hand stiffened on my neck, not daring to move. Right now I'm not living peacefully. I won't let others live peacefully either. Since childhood, I never understood what endurance meant. I only know I'd rather be shattered jade than intact tile. Perhaps my gaze was too fierce, or perhaps the pressure from the Prime Minister was too great. In any case, after that, the scumbag father flicked his sleeves and left, no longer caring about me. No matter how I bullied Orchid, no matter how Orchid complained, the scumbag father all treated it as if he heard nothing. But to be honest, I fundamentally didn't bully Orchid at all. I just personally cut off the 3 shining moments of her early life, that's all. Orchid's first shining moment was when she replaced me to attend the flower viewing banquet of the capital's noble ladies. Relying on a 7-character quatrain poem, she became famous as a talented woman and also won over the fierce and domineering third princess, becoming close friends with her. From then on, she was like someone injected with power, stepping onto the peak of life. Although normally she still said I wasn't good at socializing and only wanted to focus on studying, in reality, those flower viewing outings, excursions, tea gatherings and such, she never missed any. According to the original plot, she would become the capital's talented woman. How could I let her have her way? When she was meticulously preparing to recite poetry, I had already arranged for someone to push her into the lake. I just didn't expect she would be so quick-handed. Before falling into the water, she frantically grabbed hold of the third princess and pulled her down too. After that, Orchid was confined in the mansion. Her relationship with the third princess deteriorated. The scene of sisterly affection in the original plot also no longer existed. Losing the third princess's assistance, I guarantee Orchid won't accomplish anything noteworthy for the next 3 years. Her second shining moment was precisely saving the male lead Dorian. I originally planned to lock Orchid up, not giving her a chance to go out and save Dorian. But if I let her be confined in the house until she became a withered old woman, marrying some merchant and living out the rest of her days in obscurity, then I would be bored to death. So I deliberately helped her bribe the nanny guarding the door to let her go out to view the lanterns on the Lantern Festival night, watching with my own eyes as she saved a male about to die in a dilapidated temple. To be honest, when I saw the male lead Dorian covered in blood, his appearance miserable, my first reaction was, is this thing human? Then I used my folding fan to brush aside his disheveled hair. Seeing his features, I felt that perhaps only features like this were worthy of the author's description of a face like jade. At that time, I examined him from top to bottom. feeling that giving this appearance to the female lead, that white lotus flower, was truly too much of a waste for him. I wanted to get a little hands-on. My body leaned slightly forward when Dorian suddenly opened his eyes, fiercely grabbing my fan. I was startled, instinctively standing straight up. Right at this moment, he closed his eyes again. Could this one have already sensed danger? I was startled, patting my chest lightly, not daring to act rashly anymore, hurriedly calling little Jade, who was keeping watch at the door, to leave. I dropped the fan. The female lead revealed the jade pendant. Everything seemed to still be going in the right direction, but also seemed to be deviating from its trajectory. Until Dorian mistook the person and forced me to marry him. From then on, the first 3 important plot points in Orchid's life were all ruined by me. I stroked my chin, putting myself in Orchid's position to think. I truly was very wicked. Your mother was already gravely ill. The Imperial physicians all said she wouldn't survive that winter. Orchid clenched her fists tightly, grinding her teeth and saying she died because she deserved to die. She had just finished speaking when my slap also happened to land. 2 crisp sounds, snap snap, were 2 fair slaps. Left one, right one, you dare hit me. Orchid was stunned, so angry her face turned red, recklessly lunging forward wanting to grab me. Right after, her wrist was seized tightly by Dorian, then fiercely flung to one side. Who gave you permission to touch her? Dorian stared fixedly at Orchid, his expression so cold it was frightening. I didn't. It was she who struck me first. Orchid's tears immediately flowed out. Everyone here can bear witness for me. Before Orchid finished speaking, she had already suddenly fallen silent, because she saw Dorian gently blowing on my palm and even instructing, next time have a servant do it. Don't let your hand get hurt. Doing it yourself is more satisfying. I glanced at Orchid, saying meaningfully, if so, next time I'll find you a pair of deerskin gloves, soft ones, so your hand won't hurt when you hit. Hearing this, Orchid's complexion turned alternately green and white. In the end, she had to be supported by a maid to leave. Orchid cried all the way back to the mansion. I heard she smashed quite a few objects, making quite a commotion. But because she climbed up to rely on the Grand Princess, and previously had already shown her face before the Emperor, and coincidentally was brought into the palace to serve as a lady, in waiting beside His Majesty, these days she's been quite arrogant. Little Jade said indignantly. I overheard that she's become friends with several princes and princesses. Every day she goes with them to banquets. The time she comes home gets later and later. A few days ago I even saw her from afar in the mansion. Her nose was stuck up to the sky. I raised my eyebrow. I didn't expect Orchid would still have such luck. But thinking again, after all, she is the female lead. Even though I've obstructed her time and time again, her luck is still much better than mine. I was chatting with little Jade while eating melon seeds. Dorian sat on the soft bed beside us, looking like he wanted to speak but held back. I turned my head and saw that expression of his, spat out a melon seed shell, and asked mockingly, "What's wrong? Are we gossiping about others and bothering you?" I'm exactly the type of woman who likes to gossip behind people's backs. If you don't like hearing it, go read somewhere else. If you don't like hearing it, get lost. Don't stay here bothering me and little Jade from gossiping about Orchid. Since marrying here, I haven't concealed myself one bit. Whatever my personality is, that's how I live. I originally thought Dorian didn't know my true face, that he was simply attracted by my beauty. Unexpectedly, these past days when little Jade and I have been making a racket, Dorian hasn't shown the slightest disgust. He just keeps smiling and sitting beside us watching, seeming to even find it interesting. Just like now, Dorian shook his head, put down his book, and plopped down beside me, a bit shyly saying, "It's not that I don't like it. I'm just a bit jealous, that's all." Huh. I looked at him in surprise, not understanding what nonsense he was spouting. "I'm a bit jealous of her, because you always mention things about her." Dorian licked his lips and said, "I want to hear you mention my name more." I was stunned. While little Jade cleverly looked back and forth between me and Dorian, then she quietly withdrew, even considerately closing the door for us. I made a thoughtful expression, then let out an "oh." Propping my chin, I stared fixedly at Dorian. Initially he was still quite calm, but couldn't withstand my probing gaze. The straightforward, burning look made Dorian's ears redden slightly. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Young Marquise, you're more adorable than I imagined." Dorian lowered his eyes, the corners of his mouth smiling, his voice soft, saying, "I also want to hear you call me husband." I acted as if I hadn't heard, took a handful of melon seeds for him, then asked, "A few days ago, what did you say to the Grand Princess?" After talking, the Grand Princess led her entourage up to Mount Taishan to worship Buddha. Until now she still has no intention of coming down the mountain. "If you call me once, husband, I'll tell you." Dorian smiled, rubbing the back of my hand. I swatted the back of his hand. Dorian not only wasn't angry but grabbed my hand. This little brat is truly thick-skinned. Since the wedding he's always found every possible way to hold my hand, wanting to embrace me. Even when rejected by me, he's never been upset. He always finds other ways to be intimate with me. Even when I go out to attend flower, viewing banquets, he follows me like a shadow. So when he and I appeared together at the flower, viewing banquet, before leaving, he took off his cloak and laid it on the stone bench for me. I clearly heard several exclamations of surprise in the crowd, and there was even a resounding statement, "Orchid, elder sister, how can you have such good fortune?" I turned my head and saw Orchid's gloomy expression. My mood immediately improved, and I even flashed a brilliant smile at her. Orchid's complexion became even more unpleasant. I calmly returned to the banquet. Not long after, Orchid also returned to her seat. Apart from slightly red eyes, there was nothing else unusual. Even when she caught my gaze, Orchid even nodded at me, showing a gentle demeanor. It was truly hard to imagine that it was this very person who just moments ago was conspiring with others, wanting to sell me to a brothel after the banquet ended. My fingertips lightly tapped on the tabletop. I was thinking when little Jade brought over a letter. I opened it to see Dorian had written one sentence, "Whatever you want to do, just instruct me." Just as I finished reading, I suddenly felt a gaze on me. I looked up to see Dorian standing under a distant tree, looking this way. For some reason, after seeing him, I felt much more at ease. This feeling of having someone backing me up was truly not bad. I maintained this pleasant mood until the banquet ended. There was a young servant who, borrowing Dorian's name, told me to go ahead and get on the carriage at the back gate to go home. The trap was already set. If I didn't jump in, it would truly be a waste. Little Jade and I got on the carriage following the young servant's words. The carriage slowly moved forward. Little Jade worriedly gripped the small knife in her hand tightly. "Miss, don't be afraid. If any scoundrel who doesn't know life from death comes here, little Jade will be the first to finish him off." I looked at little Jade's serious expression, couldn't help but laugh and pat her shoulder. "Very well then, I entrust my life to you." Little Jade solemnly nodded, her nerves tense, alert to every movement outside. After 2 incense sticks time, the carriage finally stopped. I lifted the curtain to look at the desolate wilderness outside, furrowing my brow. This has taken me out of the city. Just as I touched the medicine powder hidden in my sleeve, the carriage curtain was rudely thrown open by someone. The light outside wasn't very bright, but I still had to squint. Opening my eyes, I saw Orchid standing in the midst of a group of people in black, coldly looking at me. "Little sister Orchid," I smiled and said, making little sister wait so long. Orchid led 8 people, all young strong men, surrounding the carriage. "There are a bit too many people. The medicine powder probably won't be enough. A bit troublesome here." Orchid smiled coldly, paying no attention to me, turning to say to 2 men in black beside her, "Bring her down for me." I lowered my eyes, not resisting at all, immediately being escorted before Orchid. Right after, my face was slapped by Orchid, turning to one side. In my mouth, I could taste blood. Little Jade cried out in alarm, wanting to rush forward to save me but was held firmly by a man in black. "When you humiliated me, did you ever think you would also have a day like today?" Orchid grabbed my chin, smiled faintly, looking at me. I was just about to open my mouth when another slap landed with a crisp sound. This slap left its mark on my face, making me dizzy, my eyes blurring. I heard Orchid say meaningfully, "Hitting someone with your own hands feels truly not bad. Elder sister, you were right. But I think if I could kill my enemy with my own hands, that feeling would definitely be even more satisfying." Orchid pressed the hairpin in her hand to my neck, smiling brilliantly. "Tell me, am I right? I originally planned to send you to a pleasure house to let you be ridden by 1,000, mounted by 10,000, then discard your filthy body by the roadside, letting you suffer endless humiliation and leave behind a bad reputation for 10,000 generations." Excellent. I raised my eyebrow, calmly asking, "Then why did you change your mind?" Orchid smiled. Perhaps seeing me now with my hands bound like a chicken, having completely become her prisoner, she also stopped pretending to be noble. Then I thought again, that method is truly too convenient for you. In Orchid's eyes flashed a venomous glint, enunciating each word. I want you to die as miserably as possible, as desperately as possible, not giving you any way to live. Without waiting for me to ask more, Orchid directly ordered, "Tie them up again." The next second, little Jade and I were pushed forcefully onto the carriage, hands and feet bound tightly, unable to move. Orchid held a torch, softly humming, getting on the carriage. She lit the curtain, then stared fixedly at my hair. Elder sister's hair is quite well maintained. Orchid drew closer, smiling and saying, "I just wonder what it will smell like when it burns." She and the flame were both very close to me. My complexion remained as usual. Right when Orchid was only an inch away from me, I used the small knife little Jade had hidden in her sleeve to cut through the bindings, lunging toward Orchid. "Someone save me, quickly save me." Orchid hadn't expected this turn of events, her complexion drastically changing, wanting to retreat and find reinforcements, but it was too late. My dagger was already at her neck. At the same time the horse, startled by the firelight and the terrified screaming, frantically ran forward. Everything happened too quickly. Only in the blink of an eye the carriage flew away like it was soaring, making the several men in black standing nearby unable to react in time. By the time they did react, that crazed horse had already run off without a trace. Dorian arrived at the location just in time to see this scene. His heart pounded violently, not daring to delay, immediately spurring his horse to chase after. On the carriage, Orchid and I struggled with each other. I seized the right moment to throw the medicine powder in my sleeve into her face. Her body immediately went limp. In just 3 breaths, she was already pinned down by me. "My dear little sister, dying together with me, isn't that nice?" I laughed loudly. The short knife slashed across Orchid's face, accidentally cutting her flesh. Fresh blood dripped out, making her scream in terror. You're crazy. Let me go quickly." Fire spread across the carriage. Orchid was restrained by me, plus the drug's effect fundamentally couldn't move. Like this, before being burned to death, she would be stabbed to death by me. What's there to fear? Just now, weren't you very bold-mouthed? Yelling that you wanted to kill me, weren't you very pleased? My eyes stung from the smoke and fire, my gaze unconsciously looking at her slender neck. "If you kill me, father won't spare you." Orchid realized my gaze, her whole body trembling. I licked my lips, not taking her threat to heart. But right at this moment, I heard little Jade coughing and choking from the smoke. "Miss." Little Jade gripped my hand, tears streaming down from the smoke. "The fire is getting big. Let's quickly jump from the carriage." Just as she spoke, the carriage window frame was burned through by the fire and fell down. I came back to my senses, looking at little Jade. The small knife in her hand had already been put away. Right at this moment, Orchid saw the right opportunity and jumped from the carriage. Little Jade and I hadn't had time to react when she had already escaped. Delighted, she fell to the ground, but immediately after, from under the wheels came a miserable scream. Following that was the resounding neigh of the horse. The crazed horse trampled wildly. Little Jade nearly got thrown off but was pulled back by me. Little Jade clung tightly to me, only having time to turn her head and give one instruction before I twisted my body out of the carriage, grasping a rope, flying through the air, my whole person as if suspended outside the carriage. The fire spread quickly. The carriage became a burning fireball. "Miss, be careful." Little Jade's worried voice came from behind. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes to let my heartbeat stabilize again. The fire was too big. The horse couldn't stop. To survive, there was only one way: to jump down. But the carriage's speed was too fast. Jumping down was too dangerous. I gritted my teeth, my mind quickly calculating, then looked at the frame at the front of the carriage. One desperate gamble. I didn't hesitate anymore, using my foot to kick hard at the frame. One side collapsed. The carriage box tilted completely to one side. I kicked hard at the remaining frame. The horse broke free from its restraints, racing forward. The entire carriage swayed violently, with only the last bit of momentum propelling it forward. Little Jade hugged me tightly. I pulled her close. Little Jade's eyes were wide with shock. Before she could react, I had already pulled her to jump down. The wind whistled past our ears. I pulled little Jade, jumping from the disintegrating carriage. The two of us fell heavily to the ground, rolling several times until we were blocked by a cluster of bushes. Amidst the flames and thick smoke, I opened my eyes to check on little Jade's condition. Though her face was deathly pale from fright, she seemed unharmed. I breathed a sigh of relief, spread out my arms, and laughed loudly. Little Jade stared blankly for a moment, looking at me, then at the carriage that had burned to charred remains in the distance, and also burst out laughing. By the time Dorian arrived in a panic, he saw little Jade and me, our faces blackened by smoke, lying on the grass laughing heartily like two fools. Little Jade and I, apart from a few scratches, had nothing seriously wrong. On the contrary, Orchid, because she hastily jumped from the carriage, and had been poisoned by me, her whole body powerless, fell directly in front of the carriage. Not only did her face hit the ground, but she was also trampled by the horse several times, fundamentally unable to escape. Right after, she was crushed by the wheel. When found, Orchid was barely breathing, her face covered in blood, her breath weak. My scumbag father, on a rare burst of great compassion, sent someone to the Marquis's mansion to beg for 1,000-year ginseng root to save her life. At that time I was bathing. Dorian sat beside the bathtub helping me comb my long hair. A servant came to report. I lightly brushed aside the flower petals in the bathtub, casually saying, "Won't lend it." The perpetrator going to beg medicine from the victim. What kind of thinking is that? Today, if it weren't for my quick wit, the one losing their life would be me. If I lend it to her, I'm afraid tomorrow I'll become a Buddha. I had just finished speaking when Dorian Moo immediately added, "Next time if people from the Lu mansion still dare to come here, just beat them all away." This servant obeys the command and withdraws. I slowly opened my eyes to look at Dorian. Our gazes met. I smiled mockingly. "Young Marquis, you're helping the wicked here. That young lady once saved your life when you were at death's door. How can you bear to not lend her 1,000-year ginseng root?" My fingertips slid across Dorian's chest. Immediately my hand was seized by him. A gentle kiss was placed on the back of my hand. Repaying kindness and exacting revenge, yet daring to plot against my wife. A cold glint flashed in Dorian's eyes. That I didn't personally draw my sword to kill her is already giving face because she once saved my life. I burst out laughing, breaking the tense atmosphere from just now. "Young Marquis, these words of yours make me feel as if I'm dodgy, bringing calamity to the nation and its people," I teased, my eyes showing a hint of playfulness. Dorian blushed, leaning closer and saying, "If you are dodgy, I'm willing to be your King Joe, only infatuated with you, unconditionally obeying all your commands." I blinked, hearing Dorian continue saying, "As long as you say you love me." I lifted his chin, looking deeply into his eyes, saying nothing more. Orchid could also be considered to have a great life. Who knows how she managed to invite the Imperial physician to save her life? Only her face was ruined, her leg also broken. She hid in her boudoir all day, refusing to step outside. Every day staying in her room cursing me, madly stabbing needles into my effigy, no longer having any trace of her former proud bearing. Only dejection and madness remained. I heard the third prince once came to visit, wanting to comfort her, but upon seeing her, he fled in fright. Only Orchid was left clutching her face, screaming in agony. At that time, just because of one sentence I said, "The capital is truly boring," Dorian immediately packed up and traveled everywhere. Nearly 5 years, we traveled while helping the poor, and gained some reputation. Occasionally remembering past events, I would laugh and say to him, "Back then I truly didn't want to marry you." But Dorian would seriously say, "The one I wanted to marry was always her, has always been her. What, not because of the jade pendant, but only because she is her." His words sounded truly pleasant. I also didn't care about truth or falsehood, only satisfied to lean down and reward him with a kiss. Dorian held the back of my neck, kissing even deeper. The end. True love sees beyond deception and circumstances. Dorian loved Celeste not for a jade pendant or false heroics, but for her authentic, unapologetic self, her sharp wit, and refusal to pretend. Meanwhile, Orchid's obsession with credit and status consumed her into bitterness. The story teaches us that genuine connection flourishes when we embrace our true nature rather than manipulating perceptions. What we pursue desperately often eludes us, while what's meant for us finds us when we're simply ourselves. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe,